I would have no reason to fear you. We're not the wrong place and time. Ming-Yi took another step forward. Shiwudu, look at my face, he said icily. Do you know who I am? Shiwudu stared at him, a frown creasing his mouth. He had seen the Earthmaster a few times, so he didn't understand what he was trying to say. Who do you want me to say you are? He paused for a moment, thinking Ming-Yi was hinting that his identity must not be revealed. He offered, It doesn't matter who you are. I swear on my Watermaster title, as long as you don't involve me or my brother, nothing you do will concern me. Ming-Yi frigidly cut him off before he could finish. Men of importance truly have short memories. Water Tyrant, how many mortal names and mortal births did you so arduously flip through to find me? It hasn't even been, what, a few hundred years? And you've already forgotten what I look like. Shiwudu's face contorted by degrees as he listened to this. There was a mortal idiom for manifested terror. You look as though you'd seen a ghost. For the first time in his life, Shiwudu showed that very expression on his face. His pupils shrank to pinpricks. You're still alive, he blurted. I'm dead, Xuan coldly corrected him. With 4 fingers pressed together, he swung his palm upward. Shilian felt a sudden pain surge through his skull. It seemed Xuan's spiritual field had affected Shi Qingxuan's body, and they fainted. An unknown amount of time passed before Shilian and Shi Qingxuan slowly regained consciousness together. Shilian could feel something rubbing back and forth against him, and he sluggishly opened his eyes. He saw that he was being nuzzled by several foul-smelling, hairy heads. A mob of madmen surrounded him, giggling and looking shy as they felt him all over. Shilian remained fairly calm at the sight, as he determined that their peculiar attention wasn't life-threatening. The madmen were just a little dirty, not a threat. However, Shi Qingxuan was appalled. He wanted to push them away immediately, but loud clings and clangs sounded with each attempt. There was coldness around his hands and feet, and he couldn't move an inch. When he looked up, he realized that he was cuffed to the wall by iron chains as thick as wooden clubs. His arms were raised up high. From the look of the floor and ceiling, he was probably back at the Netherwater Manor. Shilian could feel exactly what Shi Qingxuan was feeling, which at the moment was a deep, searing pain in his head. He tried to bid the Lord Windmaster be calm, to assure him that he would teach him how to break free from cuffs such as these, but he abruptly realized that he couldn't make a single sound. Perplexed, Shilian quickly took stock of his own condition, and found that a large portion of his spiritual power had been lost. His soul was still able to stay in Shi Qingxuan's body, but he could no longer manipulate him, or even speak to warn him. Could the spiritual powers he'd borrowed from Huacheng have run dry? Impossible. Huacheng knew exactly how much spiritual power it took to perform the soul-shifting spell, and he had given him an extremely generous loan of significantly more than what was needed, and not a bit less. And Shilian could sense the powers draining away with each passing moment. It was making him both leery and anxious. A raspy voice called out from across the room, Qingxuan! Shi Qingxuan's vision was blurry, but when he focused his eyes in the voice's direction, he could see that it was Shiwudu calling him. Shiwudu wasn't fettered by iron shackles, but he was kneeling on the ground. His white robes were filthy and in wild disarray. Relief visibly washed over his face when he saw Shi Qingxuan wake up, and he seemed to want to come over. However, his attempt was thwarted. He was kicked down by the one standing next to him, and forced to kneel anew. The man standing there wore a cruel, sinister expression, and his hands were clasped behind him. His skin was so pale it sent shivers down one's spine. This was Black Water Demon Xuan. Or rather, Xuan. There was an altar behind him. 4 smooth obsidian-black urns sat serenely upon it. 2 shredded fans were discarded on the floor. The Windmaster fan, and the Watermaster fan. Father, mother, sister, fiancé. Kowtow, Xuan ordered. Shiwudu kept his eyes on Shi Qingxuan. He gave a single word in response. Fine. With that, surprisingly, he heeded. He moved to kneel before the altar, and kowtowed before the urns over a dozen times. Thud, thud, thud. After this, he attempted to raise his head, but Xuan's foot came down and heavily stomped his skull back in place. Did I permit you to rise? He coldly asked. This brutal move pinned Shiwudu's face to the floor. Shiwudu answered through gritted teeth, blood running from every orifice. No. His elder brother was once so proud that his head never bowed, but now his face was being stomped into the dirt. Although Shi Qingxuan knew he deserved retribution 10 times worse for what he'd done, blood was thicker than water. Ultimately, he couldn't bear to see him like this. Gah! Xuan's attention was drawn by the sound of Shi Qingxuan's voice, and he was now the focus of that chilling glare. Even though he couldn't raise his head, Shiwudu knew that meek cry would do nothing but provoke their captor's ire. Be quiet, he barked at once. After a moment's thought, Xuan removed his boot from his head. Shiwudu was filled with trepidation, but had no strength to drag himself up. Qingxuan! He groaned. Xuan languidly approached the wall. The madmen scampered away, whimpering. They were obviously terrified of him. However, they'd still sneak glimpses at Shi Qingxuan, as if there was something on him that they coveted. Shi Qingxuan watched from where he was chained, as He Xuan come closer, step by step. The ever-so-familiar face that Shi Qingxuan once knew was now dreadfully foreign. He Xuan crouched in front of him. He was quiet for a moment before he asked, "Is the Reverend of Empty Words scary?" His tone was smooth and calm. Shi Qingxuan was bug-eyed with fear. He couldn't speak a word in response through his quivering lips. The Reverend of Empty Words of the past was already extremely horrifying. The person looking at him now had swallowed the Reverend of Empty Words. He was 10 times, 100 times more terrifying than the nightmare of his younger years. But that terror was something Shi Qingxuan should have endured from the start. "He Xuan," Shi Wudu called to him, "a man must answer alone for what he has done. It was my idea to use you to ward off his misfortune. This has nothing to do with my little brother." He Xuan sneered. Nothing to do with him. Without blinking once, he stared at Shi Qingxuan and spoke each word with clear enunciation and intent. "Your little brother, an ordinary, common mortal, obtained the ability to ascend. His endless glory was plundered from my fate. He enjoyed my divinity, and you tell me that this has nothing to do with him." Every word was a knife, and every cut stabbed the heart. This was said for Shi Qingxuan to hear, and though he knew it all by now, he still bowed his head and felt like he could never hold it high again. You've always been by his side, so you should know very well that I'm not lying to you," Shi Wudu said with forced calm. "He's not one to hide anything. From start to finish, he genuinely didn't know. That's precisely why he's so detestable," He Xuan interrupted sharply. "Why was he allowed to know nothing?" Shi Qingxuan's head bowed even lower. What right did he have to suck another's blood and trample another's bones to reach the sky, all while maintaining his peace of mind, to enjoy such luxuries without any sense of burden? "He didn't know then, but he's still ignorant now," He Xuan added. Shi Qingxuan looked up. His voice trembled. "Mingsheng, Shut up!" He Xuan shouted. When Shi Qingxuan saw his near-savage expression, he shuddered and went silent. He Xuan whirled around and started pacing the hall of the Netherwater Manor, growling as he walked. "I gave you so many chances!" Shi Qingxuan closed his eyes and clenched his fists. Shi Lian recalled that excessively furious, "Fine, very well," back when they were in the town of Fugu. He remembered how Ming Yi had tried to stop Shi Qingxuan from following Pei Ming to the East Sea. But each time, Shi Qingxuan had chosen to help Shi Wudu. "I'm sorry," Shi Qingxuan whispered. He Xuan stopped in his tracks. "And what good is your apology?" he demanded. The 4 urns had been placed directly in Shi Qingxuan's field of view, and it seemed as if they too jeered at his featherlight sorry. Misery pierced his heart and scorched his insides as if his words meant nothing no matter what he said. "I know it's futile, but Shi Qingxuan pleaded. "But you what?" He Xuan's tone returned to its cold indifference. "You know it's futile, but you still want to express your utmost sincerity. Are you hoping you can move me? Make me let go of this grudge and allow my resentment to dissolve?" No, that's not what I meant," Shi Qingxuan said hastily. It's just I really am very sorry that I wronged you. Really, Ming, Gongzi, I know that both my brother and I are in the wrong. There's no remedying the situation at this point, so..." He Xuan was listening intently. So? At this point, any further words would only sound feeble and pathetic. Shi Qingxuan tried desperately to come up with something, but he drew a blank and was unable to continue. "Well, talk. Why did you stop?" He Xuan asked coldly. "So are you willing to die for your sins?" Shi Qingxuan was shocked. Shi Wudu couldn't listen anymore and shouted, "He Xuan, the offense was mine! Mine and the Reverend of Empty Words! Qingxuan's sin doesn't merit a death sentence. And who in my family sinned?" He Xuan countered. "Who in my family deserved death?" Shi Wudu choked. "Go on, tell me," he continued. "Are you willing?" "I am," Shi Qingxuan whispered. He Xuan sneered at this. Since Shi Qingxuan had his head bowed, Shi Lian couldn't see his expression, but he probably wouldn't be able to discern what he was feeling even if he saw. He Xuan stalked away with his hands clasped behind him. The group of madmen saw him leave and came to surround Shi Qingxuan once more, hugging his arms and thighs and refusing to let go. Some tugged at his hair, some draped themselves around his neck. Each of them had a ravenous glint in his eye, like he wanted to eat him alive. Shi Lian had lived among the homeless in the past, but even he felt his hair stand on end. Just who are these people? Why did Demon Xuan gather a bunch of madmen here? Shi Qingxuan silently endured the pushing and shoving of the madmen, tolerating their pulling and dragging, too frightened to make a sound. He Xuan observed detachedly for a while, before he spoke. "Do you know who these people are?" Emaciated, Claw-like fingers felt all over Shi Chuan's face and body. He didn't even dare to breathe, much less ponder who these people were, so he shook his head. Rotten fates. Contemptuous fortunes. Lives lower than an animal's. Fates that can drive a man mad, Xuan explained. Cold dread washed over Xilian. He had an inkling of what Xuan planned to do. Shiwudu understood at once, his eyes bulging. You! Xuan stood between Shiwudu and Shi Chuan. I'm giving you two options. He pointed at Shiwudu. Option 1. Pick one individual from this crowd and exchange your brother's fate with theirs, and then go make yourself scarce in the mortal realm. Shiwudu's eyes grew bloodshot, and his shoulders started to shake. Since you enjoy switching fates so much, you must be quite skilled at it, Xuan commented. No need for me to guide you through the process. If the motives behind this punishment were disregarded, then it was truly vicious. Although Shi Chuan's original fate wasn't good enough to ascend, it was still a life filled with peaceful luxury and leisure. The madmen, on the other hand, were racked with disease and rotten sores and had been driven to madness by adversity. It was clear that every single one of them was ensnared by an absolutely wretched, miserable fortune. If Shi Chuan exchanged fates with any of them, wouldn't that mean he would fall into the same tragic state? Such fates would drive one to madness, in and of themselves. He would suffer endless agony and torment from then after. Faced with this disaster, it was obvious Shiwudu now had no chance of passing his heavenly tribulation. Furthermore, he would no doubt be banished now that the affair with the Reverend of Empty Words had been revealed. Once banished to the mortal realm, he would no longer be able to switch Shi Chuan's fate to a better one. A common mortal with his power stripped away, and a common mortal suffering the most wretched of fortunes. How could they possibly keep living? Shiwudu huffed a breath and gritted his teeth. And the second option? The second option, Xuan continued. You. This time he eyed Shi Chuan. Each word was spoken slowly and clearly. I won't touch your fate. Chop off your brother's head right here. Clang. He threw a rusty knife to the floor. Shi Chuan stared at it, his eyes wide. And then never show yourself to me again. In return, I will pretend you never existed. His bones had steeped in the brine of hatred for centuries, and it had boiled over all at once. Anyone could see the fervent madness that burned in his eyes. Anyone could see that he wasn't bluffing. After a moment of silence, Shiwudu croaked. I'll kill myself. Let me do it. You have no right to bargain with me, Xuan stated. Shiwudu glanced at Shi Chuan. You're asking for our lives, he mumbled miserably. Shi Chuan, however, hadn't succumbed to despair just yet. Let's choose the first option, the first one, he said hurriedly. A moment later, Shiwudu regained control of himself. No, I choose the second one. Shi Chuan was dumbfounded. Why the second option? Can't we both live? Let's go with the first one. I really can't do the second. Quiet, Shiwudu furiously snapped. Don't you know me? You think I can do it? Lose everything and be forced to watch you become a filthy wretch. You might as well infuriate me to death. Shi Chuan exclaimed. Let it go. Clinging to life is still better than a good death. Besides, really, if you think about it, we've lived for centuries now. It's time to... As he spoke, he seemed to remember just how well he had lived the past few hundred years, and he was so ashamed he didn't dare continue. Xuan was still watching them coldly. Shiwudu arduously crawled to his feet. He grabbed the rust-mottled knife and stumbled to the wall, then grasped his younger brother's shoulders. Come! Then he whispered harshly. Go find General Pei. Ask him to take care of you. The blade was terrifyingly heavy and covered in rust. It'd be difficult to even kill a chicken with it, never mind a man. Both the executioner and the target would suffer greatly if it was used to cut off someone's head. Shi Chuan was so horrified he couldn't keep hold of it and kept dropping it on the ground. Forget it, forget it! Haven't you always told me that everyone only cares for themselves, and that there's no reason anyone would look out for us? Haven't we always taken care of ourselves? Don't give this thing to me! Don't give it to me! Xuan, don't be so immature! Shiwudu barked. Then he smiled wryly. Your brother's nicknamed the Water Tyrant. It's not like you don't know that. Over all these years, I've raised so many waves that have shaken the world. There have been at least 800, if not 1,000. I have nothing but enemies from heaven to hell. It'll be easier if I die. If I die, then nothing else will happen to you. But if I survive while losing everything, that's a fate worse than death. If I'm not the water god, I can't take care of you. I won't even be able to protect myself. We probably won't last 2 days out there. Take it! Shi Chuan was so scared that he was going to weep. No, I can't, I really can't, he exclaimed uncontrollably. Don't force me, don't give it to me, help! He started screaming with every fiber of his being, wailing until he was hoarse, crying desperately to be saved. It's all right, Shiwudu exclaimed. Don't be scared, Xuan. This won't hurt as much as exchanging fates or stripping away spiritual power. Xuan had been infinitely patient up to this point, but now he lashed out with a kick. Shiwudu sputtered a mouthful of blood as he was knocked over, and he hit the ground hard, unable to get up. Shi Xuan, still bound to the wall, screamed in distress. Gah! Quiet! Enough of this revolting brotherly love act, Xuan said chillingly. No one here will be moved by you. Shiwudu coughed up a large amount of blood. Suddenly, he flipped onto his back and leapt to his feet, and then seized Shi Xuan by the neck. Shi Lian was shocked. He felt his lungs cease to draw in breath, and blood rushed to his head. Gah! Shi Xuan gasped. Xuan, I can't leave you alone like this, Shiwudu bit out through his bloodied mouth. There's no way you'll survive in the world if I die, so you might as well come with Gaga. He squeezed harder. Shi Xuan's sight was going dark, and a deep rattle escaped his throat. Shi Lian was shocked to the core. Was Lord Watermaster really going to strangle Lord Windmaster to death? It didn't take long for the pressure on his throat to disappear. Fresh air poured in as Shi Xuan gasped and coughed uncontrollably, then finally caught his breath as the choking stopped. Xuan stood next to them. He had ripped off both of Shiwudu's arms at the elbows, halting the attempt to wring Shi Xuan's neck. Did I give you a third path? He said coldly. Blood pulsed like a fountain from Shiwudu's mangled arms, yet he began to laugh uproariously. Xuan tossed the forearms aside like they were trash. What are you laughing about? Shiwudu waved his long, empty, blood-soaked sleeves. I'm laughing at you. I'm laughing at how you think you've got the upper hand. Do you think we've finally gotten revenge after so many years of waiting? Does it feel good? It does feel good, seeing you on the brink of death like this, Xuan confirmed. Is that right? Shiwudu laughed. Then let me tell you something. I feel good too. He caught Xuan's collar with his profusely bleeding, mutilated arms. Because I see you right now. So filled with rage, so filled with suffering, so filled with hate. You're grinding your teeth so hard you're crushing them, and yet you're still powerless to bring your family back. You're still nothing more than a ghost of the gutters. Be as angry as you want, they're long gone. But me and my brother, we've lived for ages. We've been heavenly officials for centuries. Even if he can't be one anymore, even if he can't live anymore, he still profited. I still won, and so I feel even better than you. The longer he listened, the more Xuan's pale face dropped. His expression was like a frozen, barren land that had been set ablaze with ghost fire. The air in the chamber suddenly grew freezing cold.